They thought firing me would be the end of my story. They were wrong. My name is Denise Scott. And what happened that morning inside the executive boardroom of Halcyon Dynamics shattered 25 years of loyalty in less than 30 seconds. If you're even a little curious about what happened after they fired me, go ahead and like this video. Let me know where you're watching from and what the temperature is there right now. Now, I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. I remember the weight of the bouquet in my hands, white lilies. Simple, elegant, not extravagant, just respectful, after all. This was the first day of our new CEO, Veronica Hale. I had spent decades in this company, long enough to believe that respect still mattered more than titles. I wanted her first step into Halcyon to feel like she was joining something meaningful, not just taking control of it, standing outside the glass doors. I took a quiet breath and adjusted my grip on the flowers. A small gesture. I told myself, nothing more. But the moment I stepped inside, everything changed. The room fell silent, not the warm kind of silence that welcomes presence, but the cold, surgical kind that cuts you open before you even understand why. Veronica didn't smile. She didn't even glance at the flowers. Instead, she straightened a stack of papers in front of her, looked directly at me, and said, clear, sharp, and loud enough for every executive in the room to hear Denise Scott. Your time here is over, for a second. I thought I misheard. Around the table, newly promoted directors sat stiffly, pens frozen midair, eyes flickering between us. No one spoke, no one moved. They were waiting for a reaction, for a scene, for something. But there was nothing theatrical about this. Veronica slid a thin envelope across the polished table toward me. Her expression already detached, as if I had ceased to exist the moment the words left her mouth. No acknowledgement, no gratitude, not even a pause, just elimination. This, she continued, tapping the envelope lightly, is the beginning of Halcyon's transformation. We are removing outdated structures. Denise's departure will symbolize that change. A ripple of quiet shock moved through the room. I could feel every eye on me, not with respect, not with admiration, but with something far worse. Pity. The lilies in my hands suddenly felt absurd, heavy, out of place, like I had misunderstood everything about this moment. Slowly, I placed them on the side table, and in that silence, I realized something important. This wasn't just a termination, it was a performance, and I had just been cast as the example. At this point, I want to emphasize that this story is fictional, aided by artificial intelligence to make it more engaging, and especially to convey profound lessons and values. Let's continue. I didn't reach for the envelope right away. Instead, my fingers tightened slightly around something far more familiar in my pocket, a pen. Smooth, cool, and heavier than it should have been. A quiet reminder that, despite everything unfolding in front of me, this moment was not what it seemed. On the surface, I was exactly what Veronica wanted them to see, a veteran employee being pushed out, a relic of an older system, neatly removed to make space for her vision. The room had already accepted that version of the story. You could see it in their eyes. Some avoided looking at me altogether. Others watched carefully, almost cautiously, as if afraid that showing sympathy might put them next. But I didn't react. No argument, no anger, no attempt to defend myself, because 2 days earlier, everything had changed. While Veronica stood there believing she was in control, believing she was making the first decisive move of her leadership, she had no idea she was already stepping into a game that had been rewritten without her knowledge. 72 hours ago, I was just another executive preparing for a leadership transition, quietly navigating the uncertainty that always comes with new power at the top. I had no expectation that anything extraordinary would happen, certainly not something that would alter the entire balance of this company. And yet, in a single evening, a decision had been made, one that transferred not just influence, but authority, not just responsibility, but ownership. The kind of change that doesn't announce itself loudly, the kind that waits. So as I finally reached forward and picked up the envelope, feeling the weight of their judgment pressing in from every side, I allowed myself the smallest pause. Not hesitation, control, because what no one in that room understood was that I wasn't standing there as someone being removed. I was standing there as someone who already owned the outcome. 2 nights earlier, my phone rang just as I was about to turn off the lights. I almost ignored it. It had been a long week, filled with quiet rumors about leadership changes and the arrival of Veronica Hale. I didn't have the energy for another conversation that would lead nowhere. But the name on the screen made me pause. Arthur Callaway, the founder of Halcyon Dynamics, a man who had stepped away from the spotlight years ago, yet whose presence still lingered in every corridor, every decision, every unwritten rule that held the company together. When Arthur called, "You answered." His voice was calm, deliberate, unchanged by time. "Denise, I need to see you, tonight." 40 minutes later, I was sitting across from him in his study. The room smelled faintly of old books and polished wood, the kind of place where decisions carried weight long after they were made. He didn't waste time. A stack of documents rested on the desk between us. Neatly aligned, intentional. "I've made a decision," he said, sliding them toward me. "It's time someone who understands this company takes responsibility for its future." I frowned slightly, unsure where he was going. "Arthur, what exactly are you saying?" He leaned back, studying me with that same sharp gaze I remembered from years ago. "I'm transferring 42% of my shares," he said evenly. "To you, for a moment." The words didn't register. 42%, not a promotion, not a reward, control. My pulse shifted, slow and steady. As my mind began to process the implications, ownership at that level didn't just influence decisions, it defined them. "Why me?" I asked quietly. Arthur's expression softened. "Just slightly." "Because you stayed," he replied. "When others chased titles, you protected the company. That matters more than anything on paper." He reached for a pen and placed it in front of me. "Sign, Denise. And understand this, from this moment on, you're no longer just part of Halcyon." He paused. "You are responsible for what it becomes." I didn't sign immediately. My eyes lingered on the documents, then on the pen resting between us. It looked ordinary at first glance, but there was something deliberate in the way Arthur had placed it there, as if it carried more than ink, as if it carried intention. "This isn't just about ownership." "Is it?" I asked. Arthur gave a faint, knowing nod. "No," he said quietly. "It's about truth." He folded his hands and leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering just enough to sharpen every word. "We're not announcing this yet." I looked up, surprised. "You want to keep it hidden for now," he replied. "I want to see what happens when people believe you have no power. I want to see who steps forward and who shows their real face." The weight of that settled in slowly. He wasn't just handing me control of the company. He was setting a stage. "They've grown comfortable." Arthur continued. "Too comfortable. Titles, influence, appearances. They've forgotten what this company was built on. And when people think no one is watching, Denise, that's when they reveal exactly who they are." I thought about the board, the quiet alliances, the subtle shifts in loyalty that had been happening behind closed doors, the rumors that no one addressed directly. "And you think this will expose them?" I asked. Arthur's gaze didn't waver. "I know it will." Silence stretched between us for a moment, but it wasn't uncertain. It was measured. This wasn't just a transfer of shares. It was a test of character. "If you sign these," he added, "you're not stepping into power immediately. You're stepping back, just long enough to watch." I let out a slow breath, feeling the gravity of the decision settle into place. Not react, not intervene, observe. And when the moment came, Act with clarity, not emotion. I picked up the pen, its weight grounding me, and signed my name. From that second on, nothing that happened next would be accidental. It would be a revealing. By the next morning, I walked back into Halcyon Dynamics with an empty box in my hands instead of flowers. The building felt different, not physically. The marble floors were still polished. The glass walls still reflected the same quiet efficiency, but something in the air had shifted. Conversations softened when I passed. Some stopped altogether. It wasn't hostility. It was something more uncomfortable, awareness. People knew what had happened, and they didn't know what to do with it. I made my way down the corridor toward my office, each step slower than I expected. 25 years of routine had trained my body to move with certainty in these halls. Now, every glance, every silence reminded me that this chapter was being closed in front of an audience, inside my office. The light filtered through half-drawn blinds, casting long shadows across the desk that had held most of my life's work. I set the box down and stood there for a moment, letting the stillness settle. Then I began. A framed photo from a project completion 5 years ago. A binder filled with crisis reports that had once saved the company millions. A chipped coffee mug that had stayed with me through nights no one else saw. Each item carried a memory, not of success, but of effort. Sacrifice rarely looks impressive from the outside. I picked up an old leather folder and paused, my fingers tracing the worn edges. There had been nights spent in airports, waiting on delayed shipments, calls taken at dawn, solving problems before most people even woke up. And one memory that still stayed with me more than the others: the day my father was buried. I had been here instead, standing in a war room, managing a logistics failure that threatened everything. I told myself it mattered, that the company needed me, but standing there now, holding pieces of that past in my hands, I wondered what it had truly cost. Through the glass walls, I saw familiar faces. Some looked away quickly, others didn't, and in their eyes, there was something the boardroom had failed to see: respect. That respect didn't follow me into the executive floor the next day. By Thursday morning, Halcyon had already begun to echo with a different tone. Colder, sharper, the kind of atmosphere that doesn't invite trust, only compliance. I wasn't in the conference room, but in a company like this, walls don't keep secrets for long. Veronica Hale was holding her first full leadership meeting, and she wasn't easing into it. "We are no longer operating with sentiment," she announced, pacing slowly in front of the long glass table. Her voice carried with precision, each word designed to land. "This company has been burdened by outdated thinking for far too long." Outdated thinking. I didn't need to be in the room to know what she meant. A colleague later described the moment her tone shifted, almost deliberately, as if she wanted to make sure every person understood exactly who she was referring to. "Legacy employees," she continued, "often mistake longevity for value, but time alone does not equal relevance." There it was, 25 years reduced to a liability. Every late night, every crisis resolved, every decision made under pressure, reframed as something that held the company back. Not once did she acknowledge the foundation those years had built. Not once did she pause to consider what had been preserved, not just maintained. Instead, she pushed forward, voice rising with confidence. "We will rebuild from the ground up. Departments will be streamlined. Loyalty to old systems is not an asset, it's an obstacle." No one interrupted her. No one challenged her. Silence. Again. But this time, it wasn't uncertainty. It was submission. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan Cole, a junior analyst I had mentored years ago. Quiet. Observant. The kind of person people underestimated until it mattered. "You should hear this." The message read, attached was an audio file. I pressed play. Veronica's voice filled the room around me, clearer than any second-hand account. People like Denise Scott, she said, with a faint edge of disdain, are exactly what we need to move past. They represent everything we are no longer willing to tolerate. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just listened. Because in that moment, something shifted. This wasn't just arrogance, it was evidence. Friday morning arrived with a quiet tension that settled over Halcyon like a storm waiting to break. The boardroom was already full. Polished wood stretched across the length of the table, reflecting the muted light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. Directors sat in their usual places, composed, measured, but not entirely at ease. There was a subtle shift in posture, in the way they glanced at one another, as if something unspoken was hanging in the air. At the far end of the table, one chair stood out. A simple nameplate rested in front of it. Majority shareholder. Empty. It didn't go unnoticed. A few directors leaned slightly toward each other, exchanging quiet whispers. Others tried to appear indifferent, flipping through reports or checking their tablets. But the absence carried weight, in a room built on control. An empty seat with that title was more than unusual. It was unsettling. At the head of the table, Veronica Hale noticed it too, but instead of hesitation, she chose confidence. "You'll be pleased to know," she began smoothly, tapping her pen lightly against her notes, "that our new investor is fully aligned with the direction I'm taking this company." Her tone was calm, assured, practiced. "They've reviewed the restructuring plan in advance," she continued, allowing a small, controlled smile to form. "Their absence today is simply procedural. You can consider it a silent endorsement." A few nods followed, not strong, not convincing, but enough to keep the meeting moving. Veronica stepped forward, gesturing toward the presentation screen behind her. Charts, projections, forecasts, everything carefully constructed to support her vision of efficiency and transformation. "This is a turning point," she said, her voice gaining momentum. "We are removing inefficiencies, eliminating outdated frameworks, and rebuilding Halcyon into something sharper, faster, and more competitive." She believed it, every word, and more importantly, she believed the person behind that empty chair stood with her, outside the room, just beyond the frosted glass doors. I stood in silence, waiting. I didn't move right away, through the frosted glass. I could hear the rhythm of her voice rising and falling, confident, controlled, completely certain of the ground beneath her, the kind of certainty that only exists when no one has challenged it yet. Inside, chairs shifted, papers moved. The quiet choreography of agreement was already beginning. Then the door opened, not dramatically, not forcefully, just enough for the assistant to step in. Her expression tighter than it should have been. She carried a tablet in one hand, her grip just slightly unsteady. "Apologies," she said, her voice cutting through the room more sharply than intended. "There's an update you all need to see." Veronica paused, irritation flickering across her face. "This can wait," she replied. "Dismissive. It can't," the assistant said. Quieter this time, but firm, that was enough. A subtle shift passed through the room as attention moved away from the presentation. Screens lit up. Notifications appeared almost simultaneously across the table. I watched through the glass as the confidence drained. Not instantly, but in stages. Confusion first, then disbelief, and finally, recognition. The message was simple, direct, impossible to misinterpret. Ownership update. Denise Scott now holds 42% of Halcyon Dynamics voting shares. Effective immediately. Board acknowledgement required. Silence followed. Not the controlled silence from earlier. This one was heavier, unstable. Veronica's posture stiffened. Her hand tightened around the edge of the table as her eyes scanned the screen again, as if repetition might change the outcome. "That's not possible," she said, too quickly. No one answered, because no one could. The room had already shifted. You could see it in the way the directors leaned back slightly, creating distance, in the way their eyes moved not toward her, but toward that empty chair at the end of the table, the one that suddenly wasn't empty anymore. Outside. I exhaled slowly. The moment had arrived, and inside that room, for the first time since she spoke my name, Veronica Hale wasn't in control anymore. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Every conversation stopped. The sound of my shoes against the polished floor carried farther than it should have, echoing through the silence like a signal no one could ignore. No one had expected me to walk back into that room, not like this. I didn't rush. I didn't speak. I simply walked forward, past the faces that had watched me leave just days ago, past the same table where my name had been erased without hesitation. This time, their eyes followed me differently, not with pity, with uncertainty. Veronica stood frozen at the head of the table. The confidence she had worn so effortlessly now fractured. This is a mistake, she said, her voice tightening. There's been an error in the filing. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I reached the end of the table and paused beside the chair marked Majority Shareholder. I let the moment stretch, just long enough for the weight of it to settle into the room. Then I sat down. The soft creak of leather was enough to shift everything. Veronica stepped forward, forcing control back into her tone. You were terminated under executive authority, she said. You have no standing here. I met her gaze calmly. That authority, I replied evenly, ends where ownership begins. The words didn't need to be louder. They just needed to be true. A ripple moved through the board. One director leaned back, considering. Another glanced down at the notification again, then slowly nodded. The hesitation that had filled the room minutes ago began to dissolve. I recognized Denise's position. One of them said, then another, and another. Veronica's expression changed, not anger. Not yet, but something closer to realization, the kind that arrives too late to be useful. I placed the envelope she had given me back onto the table. I do not accept the termination, I said calmly. And this time, no one disagreed. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was decisive. I let it settle before speaking again. My voice steady, controlled. From this moment forward, I said, looking directly at Veronica. You will report to me. No one interrupted. No one objected. Around the table, shoulders eased. A tension that had quietly built over the past few days began to release. Not dramatically, but in small, unmistakable ways. A director exhaled. Another leaned back, no longer forcing agreement where it didn't belong. Veronica didn't respond immediately. For the first time since she walked into this company, she had nothing to say. I reached into my pocket and placed the pen gently on the table. The same pen that had signed the papers 2 days earlier. The same one that had turned silence into authority. This company wasn't built on shortcuts. I continued. It was built on consistency, on people who showed up when it mattered, who stayed when it was difficult. My gaze moved briefly across the room. Loyalty is not outdated. It's the reason this company still stands. No applause, no dramatic reaction, just quiet understanding. And that was enough. I gathered the documents in front of me, calm, composed, not victorious in the way people expect, but certain, grounded. Because real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. As I stood and walked toward the door, I didn't look back. I didn't have to. For the first time in years, I wasn't leaving that room as an employee. I was leaving as the one responsible for what came next, looking back on everything that happened. I realized this story was never just about power or revenge. It was about patience, self-worth, and the quiet strength of staying true to who you are, even when no one seems to notice. Through this story, I've learned 5 important lessons. First, patience is a hidden advantage. Sometimes the best move is not reacting immediately, but waiting for the right moment. Second, True value doesn't need constant validation even when others overlook you. Your work and integrity still matter. Third, people reveal their true nature when they think you have no power, and that's when you see clearly who deserves your trust. Fourth, real power is quiet. It doesn't come from loud words, but from calm decisions and consistent actions. And finally, never underestimate yourself, because the moment you stop believing in your own worth is the moment others define it for you. This journey reminded me that sometimes the strongest position is the one no one sees coming. What about you? Which lesson left the deepest impression on you? I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. Your perspective might inspire someone else in this community. If this story resonated with you even a little, consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a comment, and sharing this video with someone who might need it today. Every voice here matters, including yours. Thank you for being part of this journey, and I'll see you in the next story.
Welcome to Boardroom Revenge Stories, a channel focused on workplace conflict, corporate betrayal, power struggles, and quiet justice. Our stories follow a structured workflow to deliver a consistent, immersive experience. We start by analyzing real discussions on Reddit, Facebook, Quora, and blogs. Next, we craft original scripts using AI tools like ChatGPT. We then use 11 Labs to transform text into high-quality voice and edit everything in CapCut for a smooth, cinematic finish. Thumbnails are designed with Canva, and every video is carefully reviewed before release. These stories go beyond entertainment, revealing how power truly works and how justice quietly unfolds.